Hello, beautiful souls, and welcome to Transforming 45. I'm your host, Lisa Boat. In this podcast, we dive deep into the transformative power of storytelling. I firmly believe that stories have the magical ability to heal, inspire, and connect us. That's why I'm here to bring you the incredible stories of women who have journeyed through life's ups and downs and emerged as their most authentic selves. We'll explore stories of resilience, reinvention, and the courage it takes to embrace change. It's a space where authenticity shines, where the messy and the beautiful moments of life come together to create something truly extraordinary. So, brilliant listeners, get ready for a roller coaster of emotions, a burst of inspiration, and a whole lot of love. Transforming 45 is not just a podcast, it's a movement, a celebration of incredible humans who light up the world. I'm so grateful you are here, and I can't wait to embark on this transformative journey with you. Let's dive in and start transforming together. Hello, and welcome to this week's episode of Transforming 45. As you can tell by the smile on my face, and for those of you who are listening, I hope you can hear it in my voice. I am really happy to welcome Jenn Coken to the show. Jenn is recognized by ABC, MSNBC, and TEDx. Jenn is an internationally acclaimed comedian, coach, speaker, and imposter syndrome expert. There's going to be some juicy stuff that we get into around that, I have no doubt. Jenn has coached nearly 10,000 leaders in the last 30 years in public and private sectors. She has a vision of a world of people at home with themselves and a world where each and every human being is recognized, appreciated, and known for their unique contributions. That's a really powerful and beautiful vision. And I can just imagine what life would be like were that true. So welcome to the show, Jenn. I'm so glad to have you here today.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm so glad to be here today. I've been excited about it all week.
Me
Yes.
too.
Yes.
Yes. I said this before on my show, but it's part of this dream that I have now, this life where I get to talk to incredible humans on a really regular basis. And it fills my life with so much light and joy. So thank you for being the light and joy today.
You are welcome. It sounds to me like you would be at home with yourself doing this kind of thing.
I am at home with myself doing this kind of thing. It's where I am the most at home. And thank
There
you
you go.
for noticing and pointing that out. All right. So, Jenn, who are you and how did life introduce you to this version?
It kicked me right in the ass chaps. Oh my gosh. It is so true, right? Every time life kicks you in the butt, you can either whine about it, stay down about it, or rise up. And I've always said that any leader is judged by how they get up from a failure, not by their failures themselves, right? Man, it has been such a journey throughout my life of how I got from where I was to who I am today. So I was in politics for 30 years, working at the local, state, and national level, working on issue campaigns, getting people elected. And for 20 of those years-ish, 20-ish, 18 years, I was also a coach for a big international personal growth and development company called Landmark Worldwide. So I used to lead their seminars, and that was as a volunteer, coaching people 30 hours a week, being trained out the wazoo, watching every tape of every time I led, having coaches sit in on my coaching calls. Man, I was trained to really listen. And I'm doing a little tangent here, but that my vision came out of 9/11 because I was about to walk to the front of the room to lead a session of my seminar the day after. And living in Washington, D.C., I mean, we all were impacted by 9/11, but especially living in Washington, D.C., I had to drive past New York City to get home in time to lead the seminar. And, people in my seminar were in the Pentagon when the plane hit. And it was just there was no way in heck that I could walk to the front of that room and lead the content. And my coach looked at me and he said, well, like, where are you anchoring yourself? We call it, where are you standing? Where are you anchoring yourself? And I said, David, I knew you were going to ask me that. And I've been thinking a lot about this. I don't agree with any terrorist acts, right? But if you think about any act of terrorism, it's to get people's attention. And I said, what if people just were at home with themselves and we appreciated each other for our unique contributions, we wouldn't have to terrorize each other. We wouldn't have to be the loudest voice in the room in order to feel like we were being heard. And I said, then there's the chance of peace on the planet. Then there's the chance of no more racism. Then there's the chance of no more domestic violence, no more child abuse, all the things that we think about and watch the news or try to turn off the news, the things that kind of plague us or haunt us, or the things that we've experienced. In a world where everyone's at home with themselves, I don't think that stuff stands a chance. And that vision that I created, what is that now, 23 years ago, drives me to this day. As I was coaching people and I was in politics, I mean, the coaching for me was always my heart. Being able to be with someone and all their humanity and have that empathy and compassion, but also raise the bar, which is what a coach does, right? It is what was in my heart, what I knew I was called to do, but I wasn't going to go work for Landmark. And I loved what I did in politics too. I felt very called by that, very called about making a difference and righting wrongs and protecting the environment and getting people, I felt very, very strongly about that. But there was this moment around 2016 where both these worlds, I went, yeah, I'm done with both. Actually 2015 for Landmark, and then 2016, the day before my first book came out, I was notified that my services were no longer needed by my boss. And I had built up this 12-person team to lobby municipalities to hire our company. And I looked at him, I said, get the fuck out. He goes, no, Jen. He had this like crocodile tear. He's like, no, we're reorganizing the company. It's not based on your performance. It's necessary for the company. So I said, who else on my team are you laying off? It was like half the team. And I said, can I stay and do it? And he kind of looked at me. He's like, yeah, you can. Right. So, and I didn't know my book was coming out the next day. Laid everybody off. We all went out together as a team. I also made sure that all the right files were in the right places so that people could find them and take the work we had put together and the team had put together and replicate it and use it. I wasn't about to be bitter. I understood it's business. It's not personal. And the next day my book came out. And it was the fourth time that I had been laid off over the 7 rewrites of my book. Kind of got me to thinking, like, is there something more? There's always something more, right? Yeah. But am I supposed to, is there a bigger calling for me? And I thought at the time it was to bring attention to the issue of ovarian cancer, because that's what my mom died of, and what, in a lot of ways, the book's a memoir about our relationship. And I did that for, 4 months and got the book to number 1 on Amazon, Amazon bestseller, and did radio and TV. But man, was it hard to be with everyone's grief and to be talking about and reliving my mom's death over and over and over again. And I couldn't take it. Energetically, I couldn't take it. And one of my coaches said to me, I think you need to make some money too, because I hadn't made a dime. You don't make, as a self-published author, you don't make any money. Right. And I was lucky enough to have what's known as a hybrid publisher, but now all of their books that they publish are in Barnes and Noble bookstores. And spoiler alert, they're going to be publishing my book that's coming out next year on leadership. But I went back to coaching, and even longer story that I won't get into. I found my way to coaching the very kind of person I was, which was a woman who was in a powerful position, who was making decisions, but not a lot of role models of other women around in the energy industry and in other industries. And it became important to me for women to lead as women, to lead with our nurturing, collaborative voices and not try to model men. I was just on the phone earlier today with some of my team, and I said, I used to have this moniker, right? Like a phrase I would say, be like, if you can't hack it, get your jacket. I don't care. I'll find someone else to replace you. I was a hell of a good manager. Not. So, where I coach people from now is all the mistakes I made. I used to say to people, you can sleep when you're dead. Really? You're going to die earlier because you don't have enough sleep. Let's just start there. Thank you, National Sleep Foundation. So that's, life kicked my butt. and kept kicking my butt. And I kept turning those dark clouds into silver linings and figuring out the lessons I was learning, really,
Mhm.
and
Yeah.
growing from them, you know?
I've been trying to think, like, where do I want to start this conversation? Because there are so many things that you talked about that I think are really, really important. And as I listen to each of your stories and think about your mission, going back to when you were standing at the front of the room the day after 9/11, when you said, where am I going to anchor myself? The thought that came up in my head was right here in this room, right here in this room.
Mm-hmm.
And being present to and listening to what's happening in this moment.
Yes.
And that's what I heard as the theme as you were going through each of those chapters, was that deep presence. So, for example, the story of you were let go, but you asked if you could stay to let your team go because of, now I'm assuming, so please correct me if I am wrong, but the relationships that you had built with with those people, you wanted to be there and present for them in that moment.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
They were family. You know, we worked hard, and yeah, they were family. And I had never thought about it the way you're thinking about it. And I love that, because I often will say to people, you can Google how to do leadership. You know, give me the top 10 tips on overcoming imposter syndrome. Give me the top 10 tips on being a great leader. But what no one speaks about is how to have executive presence. What is it to be present
Mm-hmm.
in every moment, right here, right now, listening, as you said, listening for people's commitment, listening for what they're concerned about, that they're not saying, what's behind what they're saying. And you're right. It was being here, right now. Remember there was an old book, I think from the 70s, called Be Here Now or something.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, you're right. That's
Yeah.
the biggest gift we can give somebody, is our presence.
I 100% agree with you. And through my own leadership journey, I have seen how that shifts and changes relationships when you are able to be present and actually center the person who's in front of you and not the agenda that you have.
Mm,
Right.
I love that. That totally speaks to how to do good one-on-ones with your team.
Yeah, absolutely. So what do you anchor into to be able to be present in those moments that are, in all of them, there was like there's grief for you in all of those situations. So in 9/11, when we were all collectively grieving, in a situation where you were losing your role as well as your team, when you were working on behalf of your mom. So there's grief happening for you in the background.
Yeah.
And what do you do? What are the personal resources you have to be able to be present for other people when that grief is still running in the background?
It's no different than what I train every single person who works with me on. We always start with foundational pieces of crafting your vision that's bigger than the crap between your ears.
Mm.
And for me, your vision is how you want to see the world, but it's the impact and the legacy you want to leave. So when I say my vision is a world of people at home with themselves, that's how I coach people to say, your vision is a world of people who what? You know, and people try to make it super complicated. I had one woman who came to a retreat. I do a retreat 2 times a year for my clients. And then sometimes there's a couple seats open for other people. A year ago, year and a half, and it doesn't matter. But anyway, she came to a retreat I had, and she just was beaten down. You know, when life just, you feel beaten down by life. And as she said to me, she lost her sparkle.
Mm-hmm.
And in the course of the very first couple hours, she created a vision of a world of people who are happy. And she looked at me with tears in her eyes. She goes, is it that simple? And I said, it really is. The stuff that we used to dream about when we were 6, we still have those moments alive in our hearts. And the only reason we don't think it's possible as adults is because we're serious now. We become grown up. I'm a realistic person. Yeah, bullshit. I get it. But you know what? If Gandhi hadn't said free India, if John F. Kennedy hadn't said to the moon, if MLK hadn't said we want to judge people by the content of their character, not the color of their skin, those were visions people had to make an enormous impact on the world. And it's incredibly important with the way the brain works and the negative bias that it has toward 85% of our thoughts being negative to be anchored in that vision daily. And then the second piece of this is your mission. Me, what's in it for me? How am I going to express that in this particular phase of my life? Because we no longer live in this society where you're at the same job for 40 years. People start their own businesses, right? Leave businesses, go elsewhere. And my mission is to empower women in male dominated industries to lead with more authority, influence, and impact. Anchored there, then the key, because often those will be fine, but you can still be an asshole, right? We've met those people. I'm all about I had a client once who was all about making a difference, all this stuff, but man, was this person a jerk to his employees. I shouldn't have said his, to their employees, half the staff left. So in one of the programs that I lead and what I asked myself, I actually have a call every morning with a friend. We used to both lead programs together. It's going on 15 years. And we ask each other, what are we creating for our day? And what we mean by that is, who are we being? Because we're human beings, not human doing. So every day, like today, who I'm being is direct and empowering. So any conversation I'm in, am I giving this person power or am I taking it away? Am I being direct or am I, pussyfooting around? Am I trying to couch things? Call I was on earlier today with my team, it was not, I dropped a lot of F-bombs, a ton of them, but then I made sure everybody was okay and had them understand it wasn't personal. It was the way that's how I express myself when I'm frustrated. It's, fuckity, fuck, pretty much. Just a string of F-bombs.
Yeah.
And I think this piece of who are you being, in my group program, we post who we're being every day and the one thing we're going to do of greatest impact. Because everybody's, been trained in that Eisenhower matrix, urgent versus important. And I'm sorry, but I don't know what stuff's more important than the other. And many clients say, how do I know what's more important? I'm like, it's a really good question. I don't know. Well, what's the one thing you can do that will make the biggest impact for you today? Because sometimes it may be taking a bath, maybe going to the gym. That's the one thing you're going to do that's going to make the biggest impact on your day. So I do exactly what I train it's not just my clients, but anybody that I come across anchored in that vision and mission. I've got core ways of being that I draw upon because there's, a bazillion ways you can be in any given moment. And if you have to be direct and empowering, but you're being compassionate or you're being silly at the moment you're being direct, that news is going to land a lot differently than if you're being an asshole. So that's what I do on a daily basis. Sometimes hourly, depending on the day, sometimes moment by moment.
Yeah. And thank you for saying that, because it gives us permission to know that we can be responsive. So much of, I find people get caught up in making it intentions because they are like, well, this is this long-term commitment and this is the mindset that I have. And when we get caught up in that, we lose the flexibility of being able to be responsive in the moment and know that we are humans.
Yes.
Who are having an emotional experience at all different points of our day.
Yes.
And listening to your description of what grounds you, I was really thinking about that's what feminine leadership is about. Right? It's about grounding in the emotion that we're feeling, because all of these intellectual frameworks that we've put in place, like when you said urgency versus importance, those are all intellectual things that make us categorize and sort and compare. And we know that comparison and sorting and contrasting, when it comes to humans, is generally not helpful. And so when we can ground in the emotion of, this is how I'm feeling, so in this moment, this is how I'm going to be to move through that, is a really powerful way to approach to approach your day or or like you said, or your moment, because it really shifts the focus.
Yeah, and I think that's so important to check in with yourself. You might, look, this is what mindfulness is all about, is the elongating the time between a circumstance coming at you and your reaction. Right? Action, reaction, action, reaction. How do we extend the time period? And what I always say to people is I have I think it's on my website, which is free. It's an ebook called The Power Code, and power is an acronym that stands for pursue the facts, own your stories. That's where you got to start. Anytime you're upset, what I tell people, if you can't sort it out, write it out. So write out what you're upset about, but then go back through and circle the facts. There's very few, because the mind is already 10 steps down the road trying to figure out how to keep you safe and make sure that you don't say or do the wrong thing. When that simple separation of fact versus fiction or story, in that moment, we're present. When we're present, we can have presence. And when we have presence, we can begin to recognize our thoughts as thoughts, feelings as feelings, emotions as emotions, and telescope out to that 50,000 foot level so that we can embrace a new choice of who we're going to be in that moment. Okay. I remember years ago, this is like 2003 now, before I'm in the DC area, moved to Colorado for 8 years to be with a boyfriend at the time, and then moved back about 8 years later. And I was trying to figure out all my stuff to move. I was shutting down a business. I had to sell my condo. I had to rent an apartment in Denver. I had never seen the place, I had never seen it. So I didn't see how do you switch the utilities. The guy that wanted to move in was moving in 3 weeks before I was going. So where am I going to go for 3 weeks? Just so many moving particles. And I was exhausted just from being worried. And one of my coaches said to me, well, who do you want to be? Because you got all that stuff that's going on. You got all the angst, all the anxiety, all the worry, all the stress, all the sadness, right? Because I was leaving. I said, I want to be like Indiana Jones. Indiana Jones seemed like every single movie, he had the right thing. He had the whip to like go across the thing, and he had the torch to like light the spiders. And he looked at me, he goes, so be Indiana Jones. And that's who I invented myself to be that day, was Indiana Jones. Like, pew! I think dudes are so much better at those noises than we are.
I know. I think that's pretty good. It's solid.
Okay, good. Yeah. So I think what's incredible about what you said is just that it is how women are anchored in our emotions, but not governed by them. Emotions are important. And I've had too many people to say to me, your emotions don't matter. Yes, they do.
They do.
They do. Now, they matter because they're yours. They also matter because who are you going to be in the matter of whatever you're upset about? Are you going to be governed by your emotions and be angry? Sometimes you got to tell somebody off. You got to, stand up for yourself. And sometimes let me be diplomatic. Let me take a step back. Let me take a breath. It is a moment by moment choice for sure.
Yeah. And the way I like to think about emotions also is that they are the symptom. They are a signal to you that there is something happening in your world in the moment that needs your attention. And so if you can approach it from a place of curiosity, oh, why am I feeling that way in this moment? And sometimes it's like anger. I refer to anger mostly as it's your body's way of saying you deserve better than whatever is happening.
I love it.
And that's the signal, right? It's that feeling of, ooh, I know I deserved better in that moment. And this gives me it's your body is knocking to say, hey, pay attention to this. And then being able to approach it from that place of, hey, so this thing happened. This is how I felt about it. And I think that maybe this is a better way we could approach it next time, or a different way we could approach it next time. Now, that's me sitting in my fully rational brain and knowing that that's not always the case. And sometimes I have this conversation with my kids. So my youngest is 17, and I was in his room and I looked under his bed, and there was just this mass of garbage. It was disgusting. And I didn't take a moment to be curious about, like, why am I angry about this? I was like, no, he needs to see. He needs to see how that is impacting me
Right.
in this moment because the decisions that we have the decisions that we make have impacts on other people.
Yep.
And when we never ever think about the needs of somebody else, sometimes it does need to be close. Now, as we were walking through that conversation, I noticed his face shut down. And I said, okay, is there something wrong that I have said that I didn't notice or that I didn't know that is causing you to shut down in this moment? And he was like, no, Mom, I'm just really tired. And right now, everything that you're saying is just going over my head.
Mm.
And I was like, okay, that doesn't mean this is over. It means we will talk about this. I see like what I'm doing right now is no longer effective. So we'll talk about this when we're both in a different space. I was like, all right. So we did. We circled around back to it the next day. But it is knowing how and when to use the emotion with the energy and the interaction that is needed in that moment.
In that moment, or circle back like you did. And I think that's important too. I think sometimes we think, oh, I'm going to be like Jenn. I'm going to be like Lisa. I'm going to handle it right then. Well, not everybody's equipped to do that. And we don't always know what's going on with us. Two things. One is I went to a friend's wedding in October, and she was having it at her house. You know, God bless her. She's 75 and her first time she ever got married, and her beloved is 50.
Wow.
Yeah. She's a hot mama.
Mm-hmm.
So basically all the friends were chipping in, and I had said I would cook brunch, and, you know, I was traveling 3 hours to get there. When I left and got home, I never wanted to see, speak, or hear from her again. Now, I had to check myself. I didn't say anything to her. I like waited, you know, a week or so, and then like checked in with myself. And what I got to, which was so good for me, was I couldn't have told you what my emotions were in the moment, but I was exhausted and I felt ungrounded. I felt agitated. And in my body was tense and my body was sore. And I think it's important for us to remember we don't always have as much muscle around recognizing the emotional state we're in. Sometimes your body is going to tell you first. And when she and I circled back, I said, I should have just, you know, done XYZ. She's like, yeah, everybody else was. But I could see it was my people pleaser tendency to just keep saying yes to my own detriment, and then being resentful of people that were taking care of themselves or eating a bagel or doing whatever. So it was a great learning opportunity for me.
Yeah.
I think the other piece is giving yourself a timeout if you don't feel equipped to respond to something in the moment, right? You could have noticed it and went, okay, I'm going to sit with this and then come back and have a conversation with him. I was on a date a couple weeks ago. Nice guy, met him through friends. Turned out he was still married, was not living with his wife, was in a separate apartment, and wasn't sure what he was going to do. So by all intents and purposes, they'd been living apart for a year, but still saw each other every now and then. Okay. But he never told me that. And he wanted to see me again. And I said, I can't tell you yes right now. And he was kind of pushy about it. I said, I can't tell you yes right now. I need to sit with it. I know I have a people pleasing tendency. I'll say, okay, and I'll regret it. So I need time. And he said, wow, thank you for knowing yourself so well. So you can't give yourself a timeout. I actually stood up. I went to the bathroom. I came back and I said, I can offer you friendship. That's what I can offer you right now. And word to the wise, since this is your first online date, you know, even though we met through friends, we met each other online and wound up, we had mutual friends. Like, put that stuff up front in your profile, buddy.
Yeah.
Because if I had known, you know, look, there's ethical non-monogamy, there's polyamory. I have no problem with any of that at all. Not even a little bit of judgment about that.
Yeah.
You got to do your relationship the way you want to do it, what works for you, what works for your partner. But not having that information left me with no choice. And I value choice. And he and I talked about it a couple of days later. And he said he would put it up front in his profile. I was like, good. Because then if I had known, I wouldn't have gone on the date with you, you know? So I think what you said is so important, to be able to honor those emotions, but sometimes we don't know what they are. check in with your body. And other times we still might not know we may know what they are and not know what they are, but we need to give ourselves a timeout. Go sit in the cabinet and eat a Twizzler. Did you ever see that TikTok lady? She's like in the pantry, like, I just had to shut the door, get away from my kids. She locked it and she was like drinking wine out of a bottle and eating Twizzlers.
Yeah. Yeah, we definitely have those moments for sure. And what you're describing, I think it's self-leadership.
Yeah.
Right, which is it's so powerful to model that when you are in a leadership position.
Yes.
Right, that in this moment I am choosing self-leadership, and these are the if you can do it out loud, it's really powerful for people around you to see that process.
Yeah.
Not that we're always going to be in that space, but when you are, and again, I think it is a really beautiful part of feminine leadership that is self-reflective. And, when I first looked at your website and I saw the first empowering women in male dominated industries, I was like, oh God, I need you now because I am, 2 years out from leaving the career that I had before.
Right.
Which was education. And people don't necessarily think that that's a male dominated industry. But it is.
In the administrative part, right? And all the teachers are females.
You got it.
Bitches be taken.
Yeah.
Do bastards be given? I shouldn't even say that. Yeah. Bastards or bitches, but you get birches.
Yes.
Gotta listen. Yeah. Anyway, go ahead. I love men, by the way. I'm not a male basher at all.
No.
I love men, but I think there's unconscious feminine and unconscious masculine behaviors and conscious feminine, conscious masculine. We can take the directive approach, which is a male approach to leadership. We could also be in our feminine flow. We just don't want to take the victim of the unconscious feminine or the asshole of the unconscious masculine into our leadership, really, truth be told, right?
Oh, totally. And I'm glad that you mentioned that. And I've talked about this on the show a couple of times, but patriarchal structures have screwed everybody.
Yes.
Right? Like men included in that. They are using generalized terms again, because it's different. Every experience is different.
Yep.
And I would watch, and this actually is one of the things I've had enough space from now to really start thinking about, in terms of, there were some leaders who had really negative impacts on me and my experience. And they were men who were my friends outside of the context, and I saw who they were as people, and it didn't match who they were as leaders.
So were they more jerky when you saw them as people, or more jerky as leaders?
As leaders. It was like watching them abandon their humanity and what made them themselves to be in this system that told them they had to be a certain way.
The brotherhood. Bro. Hey, bro. The brotherhood. As I like to say, not brotherhood, the brotherhood.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And, so true.
And it makes it really complicated, because you see this person who you care about, who you love in another context, and you watch them abandoning themselves, and it's painful. And like I said, had really negative repercussions for me.
Yeah.
And it also made me think through, what were my decisions along the way? And they also were complicated. When you talk about how we take on the leadership style that we see, and we do it sometimes for protective measures. Sometimes we do it because we think, well, I just have to do this to get through it, and then I'll be able to be the leader that I want to be, because I can't get to that place unless I walk through this.
Yep.
But there's never, when you're in that abandoning yourself, there's no coming back.
There isn't. I think it's such an interesting conversation, because I think too, men have been conditioned to never show emotion, never let them see you sweat, don't you cry about that, to divorce themselves from their emotions, which is so detrimental. I mean, again, it's a very heterocentric focus, but so detrimental to the man-woman dynamic. Whether, there is I think about gender identity in terms of the genitalia you were born with, but then, or the sex organs you were born with, sexual identity. And then there's the gender you identify with, but still, even as if someone was a trans person, you know, I have my godson's trans, my best friend's son is trans. And even then you're working within these like weird constructs of what it is to be a man and what it is to be a woman. And thank God we're redefining that in a lot of ways. And thank God for trans people who are redefining the way we relate to gender identity. And I think it's something that's, you know, if you look at indigenous indigenous cultures, two-spirit,
Yes.
you know, from what I've read and what I've seen, that's been around for a long, long time. And in many cultures, been around a long, long time. And all of a sudden, our white patriarchal society that's been around, you know, a couple 100 years, 400 years, right? Am I right? 400? Did I do my math right?
Yeah.
300?
Yeah.
What's that? 400.
Close enough.
Yeah. Anyway, math's not my bailiwick. Yeah, I think you're right. It's done a disservice to men. And then they're looking at the brotherhood, and thinking they got to be as big of an asshole as the other guy.
Yeah. Yes. And then when you are in that space and as a woman, you're trying to lead and create change, I can very honestly look back now and say I used that as a shield.
How so?
So the input, because I was in a circle of men who had great influence in the board. And as long as I was standing in their light, in their circle, I was held up and I was protected. And that is where I now see, and now I'm getting emotional, of course, but that's where I see like the seeds of my self-abandonment really is there, because it felt good. It felt good to be in that circle. It felt good to be in that light. It felt good to be recognized in that way. And it was allowing me a leadership opportunity to make some change. And it also was not sustainable for me because of the ways in which I had to abandon myself to stay in that space.
Yeah.
And yeah. So it's I'm in the process now, like I said, 2 years out and being able to do this reflection of letting myself, because I couldn't even feel the emotions for a long time because they were also people I cared about. I couldn't let myself be angry at them. And I had to go through that process. It's like the grieving process, right? I had to eventually let myself be angry at them so I could set the boundaries that I needed for myself. To then be able to look and go, you know what? It's because you didn't have any boundaries. You were like, I will follow you anywhere. And I let all of my personal boundaries go.
Yeah.
And that is where the forgiveness really needed to happen.
Wow. I'm present to a couple of things. One is just the lengths we'll go to be liked, to be well received, to be well thought of, where we do abandon ourselves. And the distinction between a regret and a resentment being something someone else does, that we are holding on to a negative emotion about, the regret being something we see ourselves doing, where we have abandoned ourselves, our values, and we do it to ourselves. Happens all the time.
Yeah.
All the time. And we just got to keep chewing ourselves up to who we really are. Well, who am I? That's the other thing. People, I just want to be me. Okay, but who are you?
Yes.
I get you want to be you, but how do you articulate that? Have you done just the thinking? Who am I? What's important to me? What matters to me? Why does that matter to me? You know, how do I want to show up? How do I want to be known? And I think particularly for, well, again, I come back to the patriarchy kind of impacting both men and women, because I have to be the breadwinner and I'm going to go off and kill something and hunt it and bring it back. And the woman, I'm going to, raise the children. It's divorced from all the stereotypes. Who are you?
Yes.
That's a question to ask yourself. And then you'll know if you've abandoned yourself or not. If people are thinking, well, I don't know if I've abandoned myself. You first got to do the work that you've been doing, which is figuring out who you truly are.
Yes, it is. And it's some of the central work that I do with people I work with is that question, who are you? And generally it's really overwhelming because we haven't been conditioned to let ourselves think about who I am, because that means that you have inherent value, right? So if
Mm-hmm.
I am giving time to myself to figure out who I am, it means that I have value in and of myself, not in relation to anybody or anything else. And that can be a really uncomfortable place to be when we have been taught that our value is in service to other people.
Mm.
And so working through that mind shift of, no, I matter just because I am. I matter because I am. And that's the place you have to get to be able to figure out, well, if I matter because I am, then who am I?
Yes.
And how do I want to be here and comfortable? Going back to your vision of everyone being comfortable and at home in themselves.
Yeah.
And knowing that my just because I have inherent value doesn't take it from anybody else,
Right.
right?
Right.
Yeah, like again, my youngest kiddo came home from school the other day and he was like, "Mom, I got 98 on my test." And I said, "So you worked really hard and you understand the content. I'm glad that you understand the content, because I always try to take the value off of the grade and put it onto like the thing that you learned." And he
I
was
was
like,
like,
"Yeah."
that's a really good answer, teacher. That's a really, I'm like, oh my God, she is an educator. It's a really good answer.
Yeah, an educator who has a lot of big feelings about grades and assessment and the way that it's traditionally done. Anyway, that's a whole other
Anywho, whole other podcast. Yeah.
but he said, yeah, and then my friend Grace got 92, but she went to the teacher and was like, "Hey, I this is what I actually thought on this question," and he ended up giving her 98 too. And I was like, "Great." She advocated for herself. She shared what she actually knew. Did her 98 take anything from your 98? And he was like, "Well, no." It's like, right. So there's room for all of us to have our value. And
Yes.
again, not that it's connected to the 98, but it's, the concreteness of of that
Yeah.
concept.
Have you, I'm sure you have, but I'm going to check in, heard of the Molly Wada Statement of Integrity?
No.
Okay. So the Molly Wada Training and Development School is a school in India. I don't know if it's still around, but there is this amazing statement they put out on integrity that I have steeped myself in and give to my clients. And basically what it talks about is the person of human, it's very the man of true integrity, the man,
Mm-hmm.
person
Yeah.
of true integrity feels like they have a taproot sunk so far into the ground that society's constructs or morals or values actually aren't, and basically aren't the beat of the drum they're marching to. It doesn't mean that they don't adhere to them. They simply evaluate everybody else's values in juxtaposition to their own. So it becomes a transvaluation across spectrums of figuring out who you are. But I always think about, and it's a very long statement, I always think about that statement and compare it to, the used car dealerships that have those things that are like,
Yes.
and
Yeah.
when we're not fully anchored in who we are, that's how life feels. When we're anchored in who we are, we could be buffeted around, but it's like, ooh, what a ride. This is kind of fun. Ooh, this is fun, because we're not going anywhere. And being buffeted around that way makes us stronger when we know what the root is, the root of the root and the bud of the bud that's driven deep into the earth, the work that you do to help people, like, who am I, the work that I do. And it's a good analogy for trees, right? Trees, you don't want to protect them because the whole point of them getting buffeted around is their roots go deeper because they know who they are and they're anchored into the earth. Samesies. The
Yeah.
key is getting people to that point where they feel anchored. And that's the magic. And that's the work that you do and that I do.
That really is the magic. And what is, just for listeners to sort of take away from this as we wrap up, what's one thing you can tell someone or show them, or however it is that you do it, of how to get to that root and get it into the ground?
That's a really good question. I would say maybe it starts with some personal reflection on each day. And I know not everybody loves journaling, but even sitting and thinking about, what were my best moments today? What were my best moments? What was I doing? How did I feel? And who was I being? Because sometimes our best moments could be when we're in the thick of it and it isn't going well, but we keep our head on straight. Like, well, that was a good moment for me because so and so was upset, and I just let them be upset, and I listened and I heard, and then we sorted it out. So doing some reflection on who you're being in any given moment of the day when things are going well, so you can begin to recognize the patterns of what brings you joy, what fills your heart, what makes you feel warm and fuzzy inside. And that begins to give you some clues on who you really are, I think. What do you think?
Yeah, I agree. It's one of the things that I do as well. I call it anchoring. And sometimes it's something that happened recently, or sometimes it's looking back to your past. Like, when did you feel, and sometimes I use the word embodied, when did you feel most embodied? Because I find when folks come to me, generally they're in a state of like, I can't even be in my body. It's so uncomfortable there. So is there a time where you remember feeling really embodied, when you remember feeling good, like you remember feeling like, oh, this is what I was meant, this is who I'm meant to be. And then getting into the sensoriness of that. And that's one of the pieces that I think, like, I'm hearing in what you're saying. But also, we don't talk about how to use the body's resources in that way. The
Yeah.
body remembers. And
Yep.
if we can connect with those sensory moments and actually generate that feeling in our body, then we can anchor, then that becomes the anchor of like, yeah, that's it.
Yep.
I
Yep.
remember it. And so I can recreate it.
Yep. Yeah.
Yeah.
Beautiful. I love that. Yeah.
Well, thank you. Thank you for this conversation. It was really beautiful. If you want to get in contact with Jenn and receive some of her medicine, all of her links will be in the show notes below. Thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you so much for this amazing conversation. You just made my day.
Thank you for joining us on this transformative journey today. Your support means the world to me. If you resonated with our conversations and want to uplift the Transforming 45 community, here's what you can do. 1, subscribe and share. Hit that subscribe button so you never miss an episode. And if you found value here, share it with your friends, family, and anyone seeking inspiration. 2, leave a review. On whatever platform you are listening on, your words can make a significant impact and help others find their way to these transformative stories. 3, connect. Join the conversation on my social media platforms. Follow me at lboat for updates, behind the scenes, and more heart-centered content. And 4, guest recommendations. If you know someone whose story could inspire someone else, reach out and let me know. I love connecting with diverse voices that carry the power to transform lives. Remember, it is your support that is the magic in my mission. Together, we can create a community of empowerment, growth, and healing. Thank you for being part of the Transforming 45 family. Until next time, keep shining your light and embracing your journey.